The first sound was the whistle of the train, long and hollow, fading into the distance like a wound that would never close. Then came silence, the kind that follows terror, thick and sacred. The forest lay heavy with snow. Pines leaned under its weight, their branches trembling as if whispering among themselves. Smoke rose from the tracks in thin gray lines, marking where the train had gone and what it had left behind. In the cold hollow between two hills, 6 children stumbled into the trees. Their breaths came out in clouds. None of them spoke. Their eyes darted between the shadows, searching for the woman who had told them to run. She appeared a moment later, her habit torn, her face pale from the cold. Sister Katarina. Her rosary swung at her side as she moved, one hand clutching the smallest child's arm. "Keep walking," she said. "Don't look back." The boy beside her, Marek, the oldest at 14, glanced behind anyway. The train was gone. Only the smell of smoke and iron remained, drifting through the snow. He turned to the nun. "Sister, what if they come after us?" Katarina didn't answer. She only pressed forward, her boots sinking deep into the frost. The forest swallowed them whole. By the time the sun began to fall, the children could no longer feel their fingers. They found a clearing and huddled together, backs against a fallen log. The air was so still it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Katarina knelt beside them. "We'll rest here," she said softly. Eva, a girl with dark curls and eyes too large for her thin face, looked up. "Are we free now?" Katarina hesitated. "We are away," she said. "And that is something." She reached into the satchel she carried and pulled out what little remained. A crust of bread, 2 potatoes, and a small flask of water. She divided it among them carefully, breaking the bread with reverence, as if it were communion. Lena, the youngest, took her piece and whispered, "Thank you, God." Marek's voice cracked. "God didn't stop the train." Katarina looked at him. "No," she said, "but he gave us the strength to jump." The night came like a curtain. The forest turned black, the snow glowing faintly under a thin crescent moon. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled, long, sorrowful notes that carried through the trees. The children drew close to the nun for warmth. She held them with both arms, whispering prayers that dissolved into the wind. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and restless. Dreams of smoke and rails. Katarina didn't sleep. She sat with her back against a tree, eyes open, listening to the forest breathe. Every crack of a branch made her heart stutter. When the wind shifted, she thought she heard voices, faint, rhythmic, like chanting. She rose quietly, stepping away from the children, following the sound. But it was only the wind moving through the pines, bending them to its will. Still, she whispered, "If you are here, guide us." Morning brought gray light and silence. The children woke to frost on their lashes. Marek stood and rubbed his arms. "We have to move," he said. "If we stay, they'll find us." Katarina nodded. "Yes, toward the mountain. The woods will hide us better there." They walked for hours. Snow fell again, slow, deliberate flakes that covered their tracks as they made them. By midday, they reached a stream frozen solid. Marek cracked the ice with a rock and scooped the water into his cupped hands. It tasted of iron. David, the quietest of the group, crouched beside him. "Do you think the soldiers know?" "Know what?" "That we jumped." Marek shrugged. "Maybe, but they won't find us. Not here." Behind them, Katarina stood still, scanning the forest. She could feel eyes somewhere among the trees, not human, not animal, but watching. As dusk came again, they found a cabin half buried in snow. The door was crooked, the roof sagging, but it was shelter. Inside it smelled of pine resin and damp wood. Katarina swept the floor with a broken branch while the children explored. There was an old iron stove, a pile of firewood, and a cot with torn blankets. "Light the fire," she said, "but no smoke. We'll keep it low." When the flames began to breathe, the air filled with warmth. The children sat in a circle, thawing their hands, faces glowing amber in the half-light. Katarina watched them in silence, her heart heavy with both gratitude and fear. Eva looked up at her. "Sister, do you think God can find us here?" Katarina smiled faintly. "He never lost us, child, even when we stopped looking." That night, the voices came again. Low, distant, human. This time, Katarina was sure of it. She rose from the cot, crossed the cabin, and pressed her ear to the wall. Beyond the wooden boards, through the wind, came a sound that didn't belong to the forest. Rhythmic whispers, like men speaking under their breath. Marek stirred. "What is it?" "Quiet," she whispered. "Listen." The children froze. Then faintly they heard it too, a murmur beneath the trees. Lena clung to her arm. "Are they angels?" she asked. Katarina didn't know what to say. The sound carried a strange peace, soft and deep, as though it came from the roots of the forest itself. "Maybe," she whispered. "Maybe they are." By dawn, the sound was gone. Only the wind remained, but the children began to believe. They spoke of the voices beneath the pines, gentle guardians who sang through the night to keep them safe. Katarina let them believe. Hope was a kind of shelter, too. Still, she could not shake the feeling that someone, or something, truly was out there. By the third day, hunger had teeth. The forest gave nothing freely, and even the snow began to taste like ash. Marek went out before sunrise, taking a stick sharpened to a point. He followed the frozen stream until he found rabbit tracks, but they vanished among the pine. When he returned, empty-handed, he found Sister Katarina praying by the fire, her lips moving silently. "We can't survive on prayers," he said, dropping onto the floor. She opened her eyes. "No," she agreed, "but they help us remember who we are." Marek looked at the others, Eva trying to warm her fingers, David staring at the frost on the window, Lena still half asleep. "We're children," he said. "That's who we are." Katarina smiled, though her eyes were tired. "Then be brave like one." Later that morning, the forest changed. They found footprints, not theirs, leading deeper into the trees. Wide boots, not the kind soldiers wore, but heavier, uneven. Katarina knelt beside the prints. "They go east," she whispered. "We'll go west." But Marek pointed toward a set of broken branches. "Someone passed through here recently. Maybe hunters." "Hunting what?" David asked. No one answered. They walked until the light began to fade again. The air thickened with mist, the kind that blurs sound and distance. The world became small, closed in by pine trunks and breath. Then, from the distance, came a whistle. 3 short bursts. Katarina froze. The children looked at her, wide-eyed. "It's them," whispered Lena. "The angels." Katarina listened. Another whistle came. 2 notes this time, low and cautious. Not the wind. She motioned for the children to crouch low. "Stay still," she said. The silence stretched. Then came footsteps, soft, deliberate, moving between the trees. Katarina's heart hammered. She reached for the cross around her neck. "Lord, protect us." A shadow appeared among the trunks, tall, broad, carrying something long over his shoulder. A rifle. Marek gasped. The man turned his head at the sound. For a second, their eyes met through the mist. He said something in Russian. Katarina didn't move. He took one cautious step forward, then lowered his rifle. Another man emerged behind him. Then another. 3 in total. All wore mismatched uniforms, mud-stained, faces hollow but alive. One of them, a young man with sharp eyes, spoke again, this time in broken Polish. "You runaways?" Katarina hesitated. "From the transport." He nodded slowly, his expression softening. "Good. You safe now." The words hit her like warmth after cold. He gestured for them to follow. They were led to a small camp hidden deep in the forest, invisible beneath a canopy of pine. There were tents made of canvas and camouflage, fires covered with tin to hide the smoke, and men whispering in the language of survival. They were Soviet partisans, guerrilla fighters scattered after a battle, living off what the forest allowed. The leader, a man called Sergei, greeted them with suspicion, softened by exhaustion. He looked at the children, then at Katarina's habit. "You're a nun," he said in Russian-accented Polish. "Yes," she answered. "From Bratislava." "And these?" "Children. From the transport. I couldn't leave them." Sergei studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "The forest takes care of its own. You can stay, but only if they stay quiet." "They will," she said. "They've learned how." That night, the partisans shared food, thin soup, stale bread, and something that tasted of roots and smoke. The children ate slowly, afraid it would vanish if they were too fast. When they finished, Sergei sat across from Katarina by the fire. "You're brave," he said. "Most would not have jumped." "It wasn't bravery," she replied. "It was the only thing left to do." He nodded, staring into the flames. "We've seen what happens when people do nothing." A pause. The fire crackled between them. "Do you believe in angels, sister?" Katarina looked up. "I believe God speaks in strange voices." Sergei smiled faintly. "Then maybe he whispers through us." Days passed, and the forest became home. The partisans built traps, hunted at dawn, and taught Marek how to listen for footsteps that weren't his own. Eva helped gather berries that grew beneath the snow. Lena learned to feed the fire without smoke. Katarina prayed every morning, her voice rising softly among the trees, blending with the sigh of the wind. At night, the voices returned, not divine, but human now. Men moving under the moonlight, whispering in Russian, singing quiet songs of home. The children still called them angels. Katarina no longer corrected them. But peace, even in a forest, is a fragile thing. One morning, gunfire echoed from far away, a dull, rolling thunder that didn't stop. The partisans grew tense. Sergei ordered everyone to pack quickly. "They've moved north," he said. "German patrols. They sweep everything." Katarina gathered the children. "Stay close. Do not speak." They moved deeper into the forest, through paths so narrow that branches scraped their faces. Snow fell harder, thicker. The sound of war followed them like a shadow. By nightfall, they found a hollow beneath a cluster of fallen pines. The men called it the nest. It was barely large enough for the children and the nun, but it was dry and hidden. Sergei crouched beside the entrance. "You stay here until we return," he said. Katarina shook her head. "Where are you going?" "To stop them before they reach this place." She grabbed his arm. "You can't fight them alone." He smiled sadly. "We're never alone in these woods." Then he disappeared into the trees. The night stretched long. The forest roared with distant fire. Explosions muffled by distance, flashes of light against the clouds. Lena cried softly. Katarina held her close. "Are they the angels?" the girl asked. Katarina's voice trembled. "Yes," she whispered. "They are fighting for us." Hours later, the noise stopped. The forest fell silent again, but Sergei and his men did not return. By morning, frost had sealed the world in silence. The snow gleamed white, almost holy. Marek crept out from the nest and scanned the horizon. Nothing, only trees, still and endless. "They're gone," he said. Katarina closed her eyes. "Then we move again." The children obeyed without question. They walked toward the east, guided by the sun and by hope, small, fragile, and stubborn. For days they wandered, half-starved and half-frozen, carried forward only by the rhythm of fear. The snow fell heavier now, erasing their footprints as soon as they were made, as if the earth itself was trying to hide them. Sister Katarina walked at the front, her habit stiff with frost, her lips pale from whispered prayers. Behind her, Marek supported Lena, whose small legs had long surrendered. Eva held David's hand. Both were too tired to speak. The forest felt endless, a cathedral of white silence. But silence can be merciless, too. When the last piece of bread was gone, they found an old chapel buried beneath the pines. Its steeple had fallen, its windows shattered, but the stone walls still stood like a monument to faith that refused to die. Inside, the air smelled of ashes and cold incense. They gathered near the altar, huddling together for warmth. Marek lit a few pieces of wood from the broken pews. The flames flickered weakly, throwing trembling halos of light across the cracked walls. Katarina looked up at the faded mural above the altar. The Virgin Mary, half erased by time, one hand reaching downward through the snow-stained plaster. She whispered, "If you still watch, then watch them." Night came with no stars. The wind howled through the trees, carrying distant sounds. Boots on snow, engines far away, the low hum of danger drawing closer. Marek was the first to hear it clearly. "They're coming," he said. Katarina moved to the doorway and listened. Yes, men's voices, sharp and commanding, echoing through the woods. "They must have followed our tracks," she murmured. Ava's eyes widened. "What do we do?" Katarina turned to them. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You hide, all of you, behind the altar. There's a hollow space, quick!" The children obeyed, crawling behind the broken stones, pressing their bodies into the shadows. Only Marek hesitated. "And you?" he asked. She placed a trembling hand on his cheek. "I will make sure they don't look here." "No," he whispered, his throat tightening. "You can't." But her eyes silenced him. "God asks little of us," she said. "Only that we protect the innocent." The first soldier entered moments later, his breath steaming in the air, rifle raised. His boots left dark imprints on the chapel floor. Katarina stood near the altar, framed by the glow of the small fire. She did not move. Her habit fluttered in the draft, her rosary swaying lightly in her hand. The soldier barked something she didn't understand. She answered softly, "You are too late. The dead have already left this place." He frowned, stepped closer. Another soldier followed behind him, scanning the walls with a lantern. The beam of light swept across the chapel, stopping on the cracked image of the Virgin. One of them muttered something in German. A curse or a prayer, it was hard to tell. Katarina slowly lifted her cross. "You cannot search for what God already hides." The first soldier hesitated, lowering his weapon slightly. It lasted a heartbeat, no more. Then he shouted again, furious now, and seized her arm. Katarina did not resist. She met his eyes and said very quietly, "If you must take someone, take me." The other soldier laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Where are the children?" he demanded. Katarina looked toward the altar. The candle flame trembled. "There are no children here," she said. "Only souls." The soldier raised his rifle. Marek, from behind the stones, bit his lip to keep from crying out. Lena buried her face in Eva's shoulder. David's small hand clung to the edge of the wall, trembling. A single shot echoed through the forest. Katarina fell backward, her rosary scattering across the floor like seeds of light. The soldiers kicked the door open, shouted orders, and moved on, satisfied with death, blind to salvation. When the sound of boots finally faded, the children crawled out from hiding. The air was heavy with smoke and silence. Marek knelt beside her. Her eyes were still open, reflecting the flicker of the dying fire. He touched her hand. It was cold, but peaceful. "Eva," whispered, "she saved us." Marek nodded. His voice was rough. She always said angels were real. Outside, dawn broke over the forest, soft, gray, merciful. They left the chapel together, following the frozen stream eastward until they reached the edge of the woods. Beyond the last line of trees, they saw movement. Soldiers, but different this time. Coats darker, marked with red stars. Soviets. The children staggered forward, waving. A man ran to meet them, calling out in Russian. When he saw their faces, he stopped, disbelief softening his voice. "Children? From where?" "From the camp," said Marek. He looked past them, toward the forest still smoking behind. "And who brought you this far?" Marek hesitated, then whispered, "A nun." The man's eyes softened. "Then may she rest among the saints." That evening, in the safety of a nearby village, the children sat by a stove, wrapped in blankets that smelled of smoke and soap. They did not speak. Even warmth felt strange now, like a dream too kind to be trusted. Outside, the pines whispered in the wind. Marek turned toward the window. Snow was falling again, slowly, endlessly, like ashes from heaven. He thought he heard it then, faint voices moving through the forest, low and musical, like a hymn sung by no one and everyone at once. Eva looked up. "What is it?" He smiled faintly. "The angels. She's still with them." A team of surveyors clearing ground for a new memorial near the old camp unearthed something unusual. A small wooden cross wrapped in black cloth. Inside it, pressed between the folds, was a single pine needle and a torn scrap of fabric from a nun's habit. Pinned to it was a note, written in faded ink. "If these children live, let them remember that God still walks beneath the pines. Sister Katarina." No one ever discovered how the letter survived. Some say the partisans carried it. Others believe the forest kept it safe, as it had kept her voice. If this story moved you, remember that memory itself is an act of faith. Every name, Every sacrifice is a voice that still speaks, even when the world falls silent. Subscribe to Voices from the Camps and help us keep alive the stories that history tried to bury beneath the snow, because remembrance is the last form of resistance.